New York Giants training camp practice day number 3 is in the books. I have observations, takeaways, the usual for you here on the Locked On Giants podcast that's coming up next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to a special weekend edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. Happy to have you with us. It is the weekend edition, special training camp edition, and I promised you guys and gals that as long as there was a practice and I was at the practice, I would give you updates, thoughts, takeaways from Giants, the land of the Giants over in East Rutherford. And that's what we're going to do on today's show. Happy to have you with us. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. All right, we're going to jump right in with this special podcast. I want to talk about some of the takeaways that emerge from Friday's practice session. We'll have some observations as well, but let's talk about some of the takeaways. Brian Daboll, first thing that kind of jumped out at me is how he's been handling Kadarius Toney. Now, this is kind of interesting because last year, I don't think I have to tell anybody that Kadarius Toney's tenure with the Giants got off to a rocky start. Part of it was, due to injuries, not necessarily his fault. There were just circumstances that popped up. And then part of it, I think, was, Toney just being kind of a little bit on the immature side. So I think the bigger problem, though, is I question whether the Giants had the patience to really work and get to know the kid and, kind of bring him along and show that, they had confidence in him and whatnot. I've suspected that maybe there was a little, because everything kind of went sour, that maybe that wasn't always the case. So what has Brian Daboll been doing to build a relationship with Kadarius Toney? Really something very simple. It's so simple that it's almost genius. Kadarius Toney, as you might know, is an aspiring rap star. He goes by the stage name of Young Joker. And he's put out, I believe he has an album out. I have to look into that. I think he's got an album out. He definitely has some songs out. And Brian Daboll revealed that Kadarius Toney had been sending him samples of his songs. And sure enough, during the practices this week, some of those Young Joker songs have worked their way into the set list or the playlist that the Giants have played during practice. And look, there's no better way to appease an aspiring artist than to play his music, especially in front of the fans who are, have been in practice the last few days. And, Kadarius Toney was very appreciative of the fact that Brian Daboll did that. Brian Daboll actually told me that he's into country and rap. So two music genres that I probably wouldn't have guessed him to be. I would have thought he was a classic metal guy or something like, a classic rock, but he is into country and rap, and very appreciative of Kadarius Toney sending his music over to him. And, like I said, a nice gesture on his part to incorporate the music into the playlist. It sounds simple. It sounds like no big deal, but trust me, folks, it's a big deal. It shows that, he's respectful of, Toney's outside interest. But you know what, to be clear, Toney told reporters that he is all about ball. He's, the rap career right now is on the back burner. He is determined to do what he can to help the Giants win some games, finally turn their misfortunes around. So speaking of Toney, he spoke to the media today. It was his first interview really since early November last year, and smiling like crazy, ear to ear. He was loose, relaxed. You could just tell a big difference in him this year as opposed to in years past. Even when he had some of those pesky questions about, oh, how did you feel when you found out you were, there were reports about you being traded, and, what did you learn from your rookie year? The grilling questions. He just kind of smiled and shrugged them off and just said, hey, it is what it is. So kudos to Brian Daboll for tapping in and reaching Kadarius Toney. I think he has reached him. That relationship, I think, is going to hopefully work out. So far, so good. Next thing I want to talk about is Daniel Jones, Davis Webb, and Xavier McKinney have all had opportunities to call plays during 11-on-11 sessions. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Xavier in just a minute and what that means. But the reason for that is Brian Daboll said, look, there may be times during a game when the communications goes out, the headsets don't work. So if they don't work, we want the guys to be invested and take charge of the program, and call the plays that they need to call. So he's basically putting the trust in the players. And folks, if you don't think that doesn't go a long way with the players, think again, because it's not micromanaging them. It's saying, okay, look, guys, we are all invested in this system, offense or defense. So we are all going to have a piece of ownership. And I'm going to trust you if the circumstances dictate that, we can't communicate through the headset. I'm going to trust you to make the calls. And it was kind of spirited, to be honest with you, the offense and the defense going back and forth and try, I think the defense got the better of the offense. At least they certainly did on Friday. But the players, Xavier McKinney said he loved calling the plays. And that brings me to my next point with the Giants. And that is, it looks like Xavier McKinney is going to wear the green dot on his helmet. Now, the green dot, as you know, means that he's going to have the radio in the helmet. It is very rare that a safety makes the defensive calls. Usually that role is reserved for the middle linebacker. But you know what? This isn't a surprise to me because I suspected in Wink Martindale's defense that maybe Blake Martinez, even when healthy, Tate Crowder, that they probably won't be every down players. Xavier McKinney will be out there every down on the field. So I'm not surprised that Xavier McKinney is getting that role. He's being moved all over the place and doing, a bang up job with wherever he's been assigned. And, he's been calling the plays and he's relishing that leadership role. So you can really see the confidence in him. And he spoke to the media on Friday and talked about how Coach Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinator, set him up or suggested that he call Eric Weddle, now retired safety, who last played with the Los Angeles Rams, retired after last year, as a matter of fact. But Weddle had been in Wink Martindale's system down in Baltimore from, I think, 2016 to 2018, I want to say. So Xavier McKinney got with Eric Weddle. They had not really a formal film review session, but Weddle kind of gave Xavier McKinney some tips on how to interpret the defense and that sort of thing. And McKinney said it made a big difference for him. So just, you kind of like the projection that they have for Xavier McKinney. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowler. If he stays healthy, this kid has potential to be a Pro Bowler. All right. Another topic that came up, and I actually asked this question of Daboll. I was curious to know what went into the structure of the practice schedule, meaning, they started off on Wednesday with red zone. Then on Thursday, it was third down and short. On Friday, it was third and long. So what was there a rhyme or reason for selecting this order that they're going in? And, on the surface, you figure, okay, you start off in the red zone. Guys don't have to run around a whole lot. And yeah, that's part of it. But Daboll's also attacking the areas that the Giants offense really wasn't good in last year. Red zone, they were, I think, dead last. Third down conversion, especially third and long, they were down at the bottom. So he's attacking that. Even though it's a new system, they're working on their weaknesses, their biggest weaknesses first. And I thought that was pretty telling, that answer. It was a great response from him. the final major storyline, well, actually, it's not a major storyline, but the final thing I want to mention before I get to the practice observations after the break, Dable had the guys run sprints midway through the practice. Now, if you remember the last couple of years when Joe Judge had guys run sprint, it was usually to punish the guys. Somebody had a penalty, somebody, got into a fight, somebody did something stupid. It was a form of a punishment. Dable's not using sprints as a form of punishment, but as a form of conditioning. And if you think about it, how many times have there been situations where it's late in the game, the team's in hurry up, they got to run down the field, several yards after a completion. I know it's been a while, by the way, but just, hear me out on this. They have to run down the field and they have to get set. And Dable spoke about, it's very important that they not be tired late in the game when they need that energy. So it was a way to kind of, keep their conditioning up, not a punishment. So really good use of sprints. And he doesn't have them run sprints after practice every day. I think this is the first time I've actually seen them run sprints during a practice, certainly not after practice when they do the cool down. So that was noteworthy for what it's worth. All right. Coming up after the break, I have some observations from Friday's training camp practice. Stay with us. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's special edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast, a weekend edition of it. And before we get into more, BetOnline.net is the only place that offers the best information on the latest odds, contests, and player props for all your sports betting needs. No matter what sport you're into, BetOnline.net has you covered. Plus, they offer everything you need to know for live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head on over to betonline.net today to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the games start. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to this special weekend edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina. We are talking Giants training camp day number 3, or practice number 3. It's actually day number 4, but practice number 3 is in the books. And I now have for you a few quick observations from the practice. Got to start off with a concern that I've had since the offseason, and it kind of poked and reared its ugly head during Friday's practice. And that is the Giants don't have to me at any rate, I question if they had a backup center on the roster. We know that the guys they have playing center or scheduled to play center are guard converts, that they don't really have a guy playing center who has played center, going back to his college days. That's a concern. And we saw that today, actually, with John Feliciano, who sat out the practice because, Thursday was just so darn hot and muggy that apparently Feliciano got, overheated and just needed a day to recoup. It was really bad. I mean, I even felt it. But anyway, the Giants had Jamil Douglas working at center. They had Max Garcia doing a little snapping at center. I think Ben Bredesen did some snaps at center. And folks, it was an adventure. Now, it wasn't like every snap was bad, but there were some snaps that were off target, that were short hop to the quarterback. There was one snap in particular where the offense was lined up. There was no defense in front of them, and yet the snap sailed over Daniel Jones's head. And as far as I'm concerned, you can't have that. One bad snap can turn the tide of a game. So right now, I would say I'm a little concerned about the backup center position. That's got to be a priority next offseason. The Giants have got to get a legitimate center in here, a guy who has played center in college and who has done it most of his career, not necessarily a guy who, played guard and can, I could play center too. They got to get a center in here, plain and simple. Nick Gates is probably not going to play this year, even though he's working to be ready. Next year, you got to address that in the draft or in free agency, one of the two, because you just can't go on like this, I don't think. And hopefully it doesn't come back to bite him, but something to keep an eye on moving forward. All right. Daniel Jones. Now, I've thought Daniel Jones has been up and down this camp so far. There have been times when he has made some head scratching decisions. There have been some times when his accuracy has just been way off. Although, again, you can't really tell if it's him or the receiver not running the right route. And there have been times when he's held the ball too long. So, to give Daniel Jones the benefit of the doubt, this could be due to a few things. Number one, the defense, like I said today, the defense was just really aggressive coming after the quarterbacks. They kept moving quarterbacks off their spots all practice long. Daniel Jones never really looked comfortable in the pocket for the Giants on Friday. It could also be that maybe they were learning new plays or just speeding up plays that they had learned, and he was just kind of, feeling it out still. Or maybe on some of these picks that he threw, when he had a pick six by Darnay Holmes, and Xavier McKinney nearly came up with a pick six as well. Maybe it's just Daniel taking a chance. Remember, Brian Dable said he was going to encourage Daniel Jones to attempt more passes, especially deep down the field, and let's just see if they work, try to fit them into tighter windows and stuff like that. But I thought a few of the bad throws he had should never attempted. So that was a little concerning. Now, again, I don't know what the reason is. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my God, Daniel Jones is still a mess, but it's something to keep an eye on as we get into the preseason. Even next week, when we get to the Fan Fest, the blue and white scrimmage that the Giants are going to have, it is something to keep an eye on. I want to talk about Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney. Folks, these two, I think, are going to be so key to this offense. I mean, run these guys on a short to intermediate route, like 10 to 15 yards or so, get the ball in their hands, and boy, can they pick up the yak. I would not be surprised if the yak leader, yards after catch leader on the team, comes down to one of those two guys. They're just dynamic with the ball in their hands, and they can make guys miss. I mean, I love how Wan'Dale Robinson ducks under tackle attempts by defenders. It's like, good luck trying to wrap him up, because when you go to wrap him up, he ducks. He takes advantage of that short stature size of his. So that was pretty cool to see. And Kadarius Toney, you can just see him getting more and more comfortable in this offense and just having fun. And what's interesting about this offense is it kind of reminds me a little bit, at least the receivers part, reminds me a little bit of the old Kevin Gilbride offense. And by that, I mean, receivers don't have to run a specific route. It's like they have options depending on what the defense is showing them. So they have to know different scenarios and when to execute those scenarios. And, that was something that Kadarius Toney spoke about, just having the freedom to adjust the route as necessary based on the defensive coverage. It's not, okay, just run a fly route or just run an in route and don't deviate at all, from what you're being told to run. So that's kind of, encouraging. I think that's a difference in the offense this year versus years past. Another observation, let's talk about the defense. The defense was all over the offense today. They were sending blitzes like crazy. I mean, I saw blitzes coming from the defensive secondary. I would see two guys blitzing from the same side. There would be blitzes coming from either side. My goodness, they are going to create such trouble for opposing offenses because they are trying to disguise things. And there were a few times when, you watch the play unfold, and it's like you thought the guy was going to drop into coverage, and then all of a sudden at the last minute, boom, he came out and blitzed. So really excited about that. But again, the bad news is the Giants offense couldn't handle it, because had this been a live game, the defense probably would have had easily 5 sacks, easily, not to mention a whole bunch of quarterback hurries and a few quarterback hits in the process. So that's going to be a concern, I think, but it's going to be a good test. It'll help that offensive line really, pull together and start to play as one unit. Speaking of the defense, Darnay Holmes, 3 interceptions in 3 days, one of which was a pick six. I think I mentioned it before in the program. Every year it just seems like the Giants try to draft over him. And there's questions about, is he going to stick around on the roster? This kid's making a case to stick. The thing about Darnay Holmes is he's always, he's not very big, but he plays big. He plays fearlessly. And I think that makes a big difference. And, look, they're going to try and work Cordell Flott into the mix, I think in the slot, as a matter of fact. But I could see them actually, doing this by committee, which would make the most sense, at least early on. So I'm curious to see more of Darnay Holmes and certainly, how they're going to rotate it and work it with Cordell Flott. Want to talk about Darius Slayton, who's had a rough start to his camp. Now, some of the drops he's had, I question if those were concentration drops. And it's interesting because Slayton, when he drops a pass, you look at the body language and it's almost like he's dejected. And this was something that Brian Dable actually spoke about. He said, look, I have to go over and I have to basically tell him, look, you'll get it next time. And there are some guys who need that extra reinforcement. Apparently, Slayton coming off 2 years where he just really wasn't effective. His drops went up, his contested catches went down. He had to fight through injuries. The confidence level, I thought it was starting to come back a little bit in the spring, and just this summer I haven't seen it. And look, they're trying to coach this guy up. They like his size, they like his speed and his ability, but he's got to do a little bit more when the opportunities come. Because right now, if I had to take a guess, I think Richie James and CJ Board are going to probably be ahead of him for their special teams value. And I've said it before, Darius Slayton has a $2.5 million cap hit. And if he's the 5th or 6th receiver on this team and doesn't play specials, they're not keeping him. They can't. So something to keep an eye on as we get into the preseason games coming up. Final thing I want to mention is, and a lot of you have asked me about him, is Kayvon Thibodeaux. How has he done? And I haven't seen him make any wow plays. I think I might have said that yesterday, but just watching him against the 2 offensive tackles, I think he's had a little bit better luck against Andrew Thomas than he's had against Evan Neal. That said, remember, the pads haven't gone on yet. So these offensive linemen can't get as physical as they need to be to stop these defensive ends and outside linebackers from charging at them. So, I'm going to reserve judgment until the pads go on. But right now, I would say unofficially, I would say maybe Thibodeaux has 2 sacks and maybe about 4 pressures altogether. But really nothing that made you say, wow, highlight play, but it's still early. So I'm sure they're going to come. So, all right, folks, the Giants are back out on Saturday. It is the final practice of the acclimation period. Sunday is a day off. Monday is the first day of pads. I'll continue to bring you short updates on the practice, the day of camp. Meanwhile, that's going to do it for this particular show. I want to thank you for tuning in to this special edition of the LockedOn Giants podcast, making us your first listener today, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. We'll catch you again tomorrow.